Hey YouTube, today I've got another 21 Bronco in the garage, and today we are installing some graphics back here. They're going to go basically from the tail light to the front door. It's going to be an American flag design, and I'm just going to kind of show you step by step what I do to prepare for something like this. To give you a little bit of background, I have been doing vehicle wraps and graphics since 2006, so this is not a new thing to me at all. These things are pretty easy to take apart and get ready. So there's another video online I have where I show you removal of the fender flares. I pop those off. And then you can also watch my tutorial on how to remove the door handle. So there is ways you can kind of work around them, but for best results, it's always better to just pull the door handle off, and then you don't have seams or anything like that when you go to wrap the vehicle. So in getting ready for some graphics, I just use some isopropyl alcohol to clean the panels. That is one of the best things you can do to make sure you get all the wax and everything off. Before I use this though, I did use just like a quick, like a waterless wash to get all the bigger chunks of dirt and everything off. So you need to make sure everything is clean. You don't want any dirt to fall in behind the wrap. Make sure you really clean all these edges, and you also want to make sure you're cleaning any areas where you're going to wrap around. So for example, I will wrap around these edges on the door, so I want to make sure I get the alcohol in there and get that all cleaned off. This is very common areas. These are very common areas where dirt will fall and get trapped behind the vinyl, and that'll cause premature failures in adhesion. So just really want to make sure it's all clean. Okay. So I think we have that. Next, I'm going to get my magnet and some painter's tape to hold the graphic in place. Now, most of these body panels are aluminum, so my magnet doesn't stick. Luckily, the recorders are steel, so I'm able to use that. That makes things a little easier than using this painter's tape to hold everything in place, just because on that I can pivot. Again, this is something cheap. And if you're at home and you're wanting to try this yourself, you can buy those off Amazon. I think they're just under like vehicle wrap tools. So next is to place the graphic. Now I've already done the other side and know where I'm putting this. So you just want to take your time and line it up. So I'm going to put the magnet down to hold it in place. Just about there. Now I am going to go over to the other side quick and take a couple measurements to make sure that they match. Okay, I took some measurements, made sure this is where I need it to go. I just measure off things like this. So I'd measure from the corner of the door down to here, match it to the other side. Same here, and then I would I measured like from here to this crack, and things like that. Measuring a graphic that's distressed like this and doesn't have a straight edge is pretty difficult to do. It's one of those things where you have to walk back and forth a few times and really just make sure you're comfortable with where it is. You're never going to see the both sides together, so that is a plus. I mean, I guess you can take a picture and put it next to each other, but it's not the same. So if you're off a tiny bit, it's not a huge deal, but I'm obviously doing this for a customer, so I want it to look right. So you want to trim off your excess. Anything to get the graphic to lay as flat as possible is only going to help you. So I have put my tape there to kind of act as a hinge, and I am just going to start peeling it back. Now this is wrap. This is Avery wrap vinyl. Maybe you bought some inexpensive graphics off eBay or Amazon or Etsy store. The same principles do apply for how you install it. The benefit to this is this vinyl will last a substantially longer than something that you could buy cheap. And this will also come off easier in the long term. So I'm just using my scissors. Obviously make sure they're far away from the paint, but cutting this backing away. And then I'm going to place my graphic back down. You want to make sure that the tape is back down straight so that you are keeping the graphic where you placed it. So I just have my squeegee here, and I am going to start pressing this all down and get it into its initial place. Okay, so I have this main part lightly squeegeed down. The benefit, I talked earlier about wrap vinyl versus some of the more inexpensive vinyls. The benefit to this is until I heat set it, I can pull it up. So right now this is kind of wrinkled. I don't know how good you can see that. Nothing to worry about there. I will be able to smooth all that out. So I have this side set, and this transfer paper and the vinyl is going to hold it in place. So I can remove my magnet, and then I can pull this part up. And now I can apply this part. So I'm just going to remove the backing and put this in place. So typically what I do is I will take, when it's a design like this, you have to kind of find a center point. So I'm just going to use this center stripe, and that is what I'm going to put down. Because now I can come back and I can push up by holding on to this transfer paper, and I can push all the air out that way. And then this is the stripe I push down first. So from there I can push down, and there's going to be lots of trimming involved because of the fender flare area, and I've got the gas panel or the gas door. So I am just kind of lightly getting this in place. I'm not terribly worried with how well it's pressed down because this transfer paper does not flex. So now here's what I got to do. I need to get a corner of this transfer paper, and I start to pull it up. And you want to pull this transfer paper at as sharp of an angle as possible. So I'm laying it pretty much straight down, straight back on itself, and I'm pulling straight to the back of the vehicle. And you don't want to go too fast because you don't want the vinyl to pull up and tear. This stuff is fairly tacky. And as I'm going, if I see any air bubbles, I'm just going to work those out. And I'm just going to keep pressing. And I am pushing down also to make sure that the vinyl is stuck. So when I am doing this also, you have to pay extra attention to areas like the door handle where it goes in, because this vinyl has nothing to really stick to yet, because this paper isn't letting me form it into the area. So I just have to be very careful, go really slow, and then once I have the opportunity, I will push this in and get it stuck and just slowly keep moving forward. The biggest thing with doing any large graphics or vinyl wrap is you just have to be patient. There's not a really great fast way to do this. The quicker you go, the more mistakes you're gonna make. I mean, that applies to just about anything, but you're only gonna get more frustrated the faster you try to go. So just take your time. Okay, so these stripes are hanging off. I'm just going to kind of wrap those around for now, because I'm actually going to trim those off in a little bit. Looks like I must have forgotten to weed out a small part, but the paper just did that for me. Okay. And again, want to go slow so you make sure you don't pull out any details. So like this stripe, if I was pulling too fast, I probably would have just ripped this stripe right off, and then I would have had to sit here and hand lay it. Okay, just about off. Okay, have our transfer paper off. Now I'm gonna bring you around to the back for just a second. So, this panel curves around obviously, but I don't want these stripes coming down. That doesn't look right, and it doesn't go with the flow. This flag is angling up. So what I'm gonna do is on some of these, I'm actually just gonna pull it by hand, keeping some tension on it. Right now it is about 65 degrees in my garage. So the vinyl isn't stretching much. It's just warm enough that it's workable, but it's cool enough that it's not gonna overstretch. If you're doing this in a hotter area, it's pretty easy to overstretch vinyl and then you lose your uniform lines. So again, just a little bit of tension. I'm gonna pull that, smooth it out. And now we have nice straight lines that are coming up and going with the flow of the graphic. They're not angling down. And do that one. And then these, I will actually cut off. So right now I'm just gonna take a few minutes. I'm gonna press this all down. And the next thing I'm gonna show you is me trimming a lot of this stuff off. Okay, so right here I have some wrinkles. So what I'm gonna do is very carefully get my blade behind that vinyl. Now, when you're working with vinyl, you kind of want your hands to be dry. If you put lotion on or anything, or you're sweaty, you can't really touch the vinyl like this because you're gonna ruin the adhesion. So I'm just gonna gently lift it up, and I'm gonna slowly go back and forth and push all that out. So now we have a nice smooth line. Again, up here, there's some air bubbles. They're kind of hard to see. I'm just gonna slowly get that and press it out. For this door handle area, I'm going to heat this up and try and conform it. This plastic piece is part of the door, and I need to trim around that. So I'm gonna do as much as I can without overly stretching it. When you overstretch the vinyl, you're basically starting to pull the glue from the back, and that's where you're going to get an early failure in your wrap. So I've just got, these are cheap knives. They're like 70 cents from Harbor Freight. This is just what I prefer to use. I'm just gonna carefully take my time and I'm gonna trim around the edge of this plastic piece. Okay. This just takes patience and very light pressure. That's the biggest thing when you're cutting on a vehicle, especially something brand new like this. Last thing you want to do is scratch the paint. So just take your time, go slow. And all I'm actually trying to do is score the vinyl. You can actually get to the point where you're cutting on the vinyl on paint, but you're just scoring it enough that it's going to cut, but you're not actually cutting through the glue. So what that does is you're kind of leaving the layer of glue, and that's protecting you from actually cutting into the paint. So I'm gonna heat it up, just use my finger, press it down. That's the hole for where the door handle actually goes through. And there we go. Have that cut out. I'll trim this piece now. Again, when you're cutting out a hole, you do have to apply a little more pressure, and you are gonna cut all the way through. But just take your time. I'm not pressing down very hard, just hard enough to get through the actual vinyl. Because I don't want to cut his paint. Okay. Now, I will just give this a little heat and make sure I can really get that. There we go. Everything pressed in there. Okay, so now I'm gonna move over here and do the same thing. Heat this up, get it pressed in. Just got a little wrinkle right here. There we go. Now you can go on Amazon. There's websites like Metro Restyling where they sell a lot of vinyl and a lot of tools, and you can get all sorts of like wrap tools. Again, I always just use these cheap knives, and then I do have called the Wet Edge. This is a specific squeegee for wrap vinyl. Kind of all I really use for the most part. I'm able to get the job done with that, and then obviously heat gun. So this piece is kind of more difficult to cut around, but this does fully get covered up by the door handle. So I'm actually going to trim it back a little bit because there's actually grease in here. When that door handle opens and closes, it pulls grease out. So I'm going to cut it around and not tight next to the hole, because I don't want the grease hitting the vinyl all the time, because that's just going to eventually, the oils are going to get in there and start to pull the vinyl up. So if I can keep that away from the hole where the grease is, it's going to last a heck of a lot longer. So I'm just going to carefully score this, come around the bolt, and then again on this side. Okay. And it's just enough. So see, right now it's pulling up all of it. Put a little pressure there. And I cut it just enough that I could peel this off. And I'll even show you under here. There is no line right there. There's no line in the paint. I did not cut the paint I know it's hard to see, but there's no line in the paint. I did not cut the actual vehicle. I just scored the vinyl enough to get that extra vinyl off. So I'll heat it all up again. Make sure it's pressed down, and we'll move on to the next step. So the next part is I'm going to trim this. I'm going to cut in between the doors, well, the door and the quarter panel, I guess. And basically the same thing as cutting this hole out. I'm going to cut all the way through. I'm going to hold kind of my fingers out to keep myself steady, and I always just cut exactly in the middle. So I just kind of hold myself there, cut straight down. This one's a little bit tricky because I'm actually going to end up cutting a lot of this stripe off. Okay, so after that, we're going to just apply a little heat. And then I'm going to use the felt edge and just push in. Let it sit there for a second. Wiggle my squeegee back out. Do it again. One more time. And then this I've got to actually trim around down here. So that is all you do for that. Now, in a minute, once I get all this cut out, I will come back and I'll heat around the edge, and I'll open the door and press it all down. So this is just kind of the initial tack. So for cutting, sorry, all my paper got stuck. So for cutting around here, the same principle. Again, you just take your time. Push the knife through and follow all the way around. So this is going to all wrap around the edge of the door. I'm not actually going to leave a lot of this vinyl in here because this is all covered up by the fender flare for one. So here is that Bronco, all done. One of the stripes on the fender, remove the badge, and then install these American flag decals. I did cut those myself on my plotter. Yeah, overall I think it looks good. I like the matte black on the glossy carbonized gray, I think is what these are. So gives a good contrast. That matte black really ties in well with the factory Ford plastic coloring. So let me know what you think.